Snow clung to her eyelashes like frostbitten tears, and the taste of blood on her tongue was the only thing convincing her she was still alive. Nadia Parker lay face down on a frozen lake in North Dakota, cheek pressed so hard against the glassy ice she swore she could see her own reflection staring back at her, wide-eyed and terrified. A boot ground into the back of her head, the weight behind it, cold as the wind cutting through her coat. "This is where your story ends, girl," Sheriff Caldwell hissed, his breath sour, his voice dripping with the arrogance of a man who'd spent his life getting away with this kind of thing. But Nadia wasn't just another name he could cross off a list. She wasn't some tourist who'd wandered too far into Pine Hollow and didn't know the rules. She'd come here for a reason, quiet, maybe a little peace, and instead found herself staring straight into the town's rotten soul. And even now, with her skull pounding and snow soaking through her jeans, there was a part of her that wasn't afraid. It was angry. A growl sliced through the wind, a low, guttural sound that made Caldwell stiffen. The shadow of a wolf darted between the trees, golden eyes locked on him like it was born for this moment. Caldwell's hand went for his gun, but Nadia moved first instincts drilled into her bones, snapping awake. She drove her elbow into his knee, twisted hard, and rolled just as he stumbled. The gun clattered across the ice. "Should have stayed in the city," Caldwell snarled, limping toward her, but Nadia was already on her feet, clutching a jagged shard of ice like a dagger. Years of military training buried deep under layers of trauma therapy and attempts at a normal life surged to the surface. One swing to his leg, a sharp kick to his wrist, and he was face down on the same ice he'd smashed her against seconds ago. "How's it feel?" she hissed, pressing his cheek against the frozen surface. His eyes flickered with something he hadn't felt in a long time: fear. That was the night Pine Hollow's carefully built illusion cracked. 3 weeks earlier, Nadia had pulled up to the cabin she'd rented on the edge of town. She'd been looking for solitude somewhere she could finish her memoir without neighbors leaning over fences asking about her past. Pine Hollow seemed perfect, a postcard town, with snow-capped rooftops, smoke curling from chimneys, and silence so heavy it felt like stepping into another century. But you can always feel it when you're not welcome. Curtains twitched as she unpacked boxes. A teenage boy leaned on a rusted pickup, arms crossed, grinning like he knew something she didn't. Later, an older couple stopped by, neighbors, they said, but their smiles were sharp. "You picked the coldest winter in 20 years, the man muttered, gaze lingering on her skin longer than it should have. His wife added, "Best keep your doors locked. Things get lost in these woods." It was a warning dressed up as hospitality, and Nadia had been around long enough to know the difference. The first week was uneventful except for the wolf. She'd spotted it limping near the tree line, its paw caught in a rusted trap. Against every survival instinct, she'd freed it, whispering soft words as she loosened the jaws of steel. It didn't run. It just stared at her, blood dripping onto the snow before melting back into the forest. She'd named it Ghost. Ghost started hanging around the cabin. She'd catch flashes of fur at dusk, glowing eyes watching from the pines. Somehow that made her feel safer than any deadbolt. But Pine Hollow had a way of showing its teeth. At night, she'd hear footsteps crunching outside. Once she woke to see a flashlight beam sweep across her window. Another time, someone left a dead crow on her porch. She'd brush it off, telling herself it was small-town paranoia. Then she found the blood. It was on a frozen creek deep in the woods, a scarlet streak staining the white. Drag marks carved into the ice, leading to a hole barely big enough for a body. Her gut twisted memories from her past missions, flooding back scenes of war zones, of civilians disappearing, of patterns that always told a story. That's when she met Caldwell, sheriff of Pine Hollow, or so his badge said. He appeared out of nowhere, flashlight blinding, her voice calm but full of menace. "This isn't your land," he said, circling her like a wolf himself. "And you don't ask questions around here. Not if you want to see spring." That night she couldn't sleep. She sat in the dark, hand on her pistol, Ghost lying by the door. She thought about leaving, packing her car, and driving until the trees turned into skyscrapers again. But something in her chest burned hotter than fear. She'd been trained to spot patterns, and this town reeked of secrets. 2 days later, they came for her. Caldwell didn't knock when he barged into her cabin. His men fanned out behind him, faces hidden under hunting masks. "You don't belong here," he growled, dragging her by the arm. Ghost snarled, but a rifle butt slammed against the doorframe, warning him back. They marched Nadia through the snow, past the cabin she'd started to call home, past the trees, whispering like mourners to the lake. "Say your prayers," Caldwell muttered, shoving her onto the ice. And maybe she would have died there if Ghost hadn't appeared. The wolf lunged from the shadows, teeth sinking into one man's leg, chaos breaking out in the night. Nadia used the distraction to break free, adrenaline drowning out the pain in her head. She moved like muscle memory, disarming one man, sweeping another's legs out. By the time Caldwell realized what was happening, he was on his back, wrists zip-tied, face shoved into the snow. She dragged him to her cabin cellar, tied him up, and started searching him. Inside his coat was a leather folder. Maps, names, dates. Too many dates. Too many names. Her own was on the last page, written in fresh ink. Monitor closely. It was bigger than Caldwell. That night, his deputies showed up in pickup trucks, headlights glaring through her windows. They didn't bother hiding their guns. Nadia killed the lights, loaded her weapon, and whispered to Ghost, "Stay close." When the first man burst through her front door, she fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The fight that followed was chaos, a blur of fists, gunfire, and Ghost tearing through the living room like a spirit of vengeance. She left 2 men bleeding on her floor and the rest scrambling into the snow. One of them, barely conscious, spilled a secret in his panic, a tunnel under the old shed. That's where the truth was buried. She found it the next morning, snow crunching beneath her boots, Ghost pacing ahead like he already knew what was waiting. The shed's door was chained, but chains don't stop someone who's been trained to break into enemy strongholds. Inside, she found stairs leading underground, the air growing colder with every step. The tunnel smelled like rust and old death. Suitcases and coats lined the walls. Children's shoes lay scattered in the dirt, their colors faded but their story screaming loud. She found a notebook tucked in a boot, pages smeared but legible. "Tell Mama I tried." At the end of the tunnel was a chamber, a shrine to hatred. Photographs pinned to the wall, some decades old, some recent. Names scratched into ledgers. Dates marking disappearances no one ever investigated. A video feed played on a dusty monitor showing camera angles of streets, porches, even her own cabin. They'd been watching her since day one, and then she saw him. In the corner of the room, slumped against the wall, was a man she recognized from a missing persons flyer. His body was stiff, his eyes empty, but his presence screamed louder than any words. Nadia knelt, whispering a promise. "You are not forgotten, not anymore." She ripped the hard drives out of the surveillance system, stuffed folders of evidence into her duffel, and turned to leave. But footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Voices shouted, "She's down here." Ghost's growl filled the chamber as Nadia dove into a crawlspace, dragging her bag behind her. She crawled through the dark dirt, scraping her face, bullets pinging off the walls. When she finally emerged into the forest, dawn was breaking the sky, bruised purple and gray. They hunted her, but they didn't know who they were hunting. One by one, she picked them off, years of combat training, coming back like muscle memory. By the time the sun set, 2 of Caldwell's men were tied up like their sheriff, and Nadia had everything she needed to burn Pine Hollow to the ground. The FBI raid came 2 days later. She stood on the edge of the lake, Ghost at her side, watching agents haul her neighbors away in handcuffs. The couple that had welcomed her, the teenage boy with the smirk, the preacher from down the road, they were all part of it. A network of hate that had been thriving in silence for decades. Caldwell glared at her from the back of a squad car. "You think you won," he spat. She met his gaze, voice steady. "I think your ghost finally caught up to you." For weeks, the news swarmed Pine Hollow. Mass graves unearthed. Families finally getting answers. But for every secret uncovered, Nadia knew there were more. Other towns, other ledgers, other lakes with ice just as thick. That's why she stayed. Not in Pine Hollow, but in places like it. Always moving, always digging. Some people called her reckless. Others called her a hero. She didn't care. She and Ghost just kept walking. And on nights when the wind howled through the trees, she'd remember that first night on the ice. The cold, the fear, the voice in her ear telling her she didn't belong, and she'd smile, because she knew she'd made him feel the same way. So now I'll ask you, what would you do if you found out your neighbors weren't just unfriendly, but hiding something dark enough to kill for? Would you stay silent, keep your head down, hope it doesn't come for you, or would you fight back even if it meant standing alone? Tell me in the comments. Let's see where you stand. And if this story made you feel something, anger, hope, maybe even courage, hit like, share it, and subscribe. Because justice doesn't come easy. It's cold, it's slow, but it's worth fighting for.